So we're here talking about the deep stuff on Let's Talk About the Deep Stuff. This is like for the deep conversations. This isn't the small talk, weather talk. This is the big topics, the big things. And I'm your host, Sean Neese, or Sean K. Well, it's a silent K, and I used to do the BSing with Sean K, but this is a new show. Today, my guest is my friend Eman Rimawi, who we've been in contact. Well, I interviewed you on my old show, and I met you at Viviana Duncan's open mic when you performed your poetry, like spoken word poetry, and you're a disability rights activist, and you do other projects as well. Like I know you work like comic books and stuff. But today we're going to talk about the afterlife and the how different religions view the afterlife, and also my view, your view about the afterlife. And I wanted to get into because I know you became very religious, you said later on in your life, and I wanted to talk about that. But also you can elaborate and kind of introduce yourself. I know I gave you like a grandiose intro, but now you're going to do like the Eman Rimawi version of herself in intro. So
sure. Yeah. So when most people think about me, they don't think that like I've got any insight whatsoever in like religion or spirituality or the afterlife or anything like that. But I actually have a lot of experience with it because I have lupus, and I have nearly died several times in my life because of my lupus, and also not because I've had a pretty wild ass life my whole life. So I've come very close to death, and I've had experiences with nearly passing over a few times, but I also have had experiences with feeling like sort of otherworldly presences, so much so that it sort of like reinforced my faith that it was sort of there already. Like I had like, I had a belief that there was something out there, didn't know what the heck it was. But I, slowly came into that. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, because of my experiences with life and nearly dying multiple times. And then coming back to this realm and this world of being. So I've got tons of insight from as a person who has dealt with it. And, I'm not an expert at any of this stuff. I've just had a ton of experience with it because I've had lupus for 25 years and because I live in this wild ass world around other wild ass people. And sometimes things go down. So I'm just here to share my experiences and, some of my beliefs and my upbringing and how it all kind of like came together in a very interesting, a non-traditional religious kind of way of being. So yeah, I don't know if any of that made sense, but I'm still get caffeinated with my coffee. And if you can read the cup, it's sorry, I rolled my eyes out loud again. Very much. My Aunt Vicky got this for me. Thank you.
no.
Yeah. So yeah, still get caffeinated. So we'll bring up some more.
I drink coffee like all throughout the day, probably too much, but
yeah. There's no such thing as too much coffee.
Yeah.
Not in my mind. So yeah.
But you said you gravitated more towards Christianity, right?
Yeah. So my dad was Muslim and my mom was Christian. And in the beginning of her Christianity, she was like, like not like wildly secularly Christian, but she was like, okay, I'm Baptist. I go to church on Sunday. I celebrate all the holidays. And as she's gotten older, she's gotten way much more extreme. And my father wasn't a very typical Muslim guy at all. Yeah, he didn't really subscribe to some of like the hardcore beliefs in Islam. He did fast. He did, fast during Ramadan and celebrated Eid or whatever. But he gambled. He had a ton of girlfriends. He hung out with all kinds of non-Muslims. He wasn't because he was very obsessed with becoming Americanized. and got swept up by it, and unfortunately he died in 1999 because, he was so obsessed with getting his American dream on, the American dream up and killed him, you know. So that was there was a lot of death in my young years. And so having all these deaths with my grandparents and aunts and uncles, and then my dad, all before 14, sort of led me to saying, whoa, what the hell is going on with this universe? God seems to have it out for me and my family. Like, you can kick rocks barefoot, bruh. Like, I don't know what the heck is your problem, but you seem to be targeting us directly. And then a year later, my lupus started showing up. And I was just like, oh, this is fun. Now I've got some kind of weird ass chronic illness that nobody can diagnose, which nearly killed me. So when I was 17, I had my first 2 heart attacks. And that nearly took me out. And that was my first real experience with otherworldly anything. I went from being a very healthy teenager, running track, doing weight training, performing poetry, because that's when I was doing a lot of it in my teens. And then once I hit 17, I was down to 108 pounds. I was very malnourished. I was very, very sick. So that's when I started having a lot of visions of other things out in the, I guess in the 4th and 5th dimension, if you want to call it that or whatever, not in this dimension. And most folks might be like, oh, well, your brain was just sort of like adjusting to like dying, and like, because your body was shutting down, and that's why you were having these hallucinations. And I'm just like, but really, I don't know if that's fully what it was. And this was back in 2001. So this was a while ago. And I had no idea what lupus was. I had no idea what a chronic illness was. And this wasn't part of anything in my life. And in the hospital, it was a shitty ass hospital in Queens. And it was either go to this hospital in Forest Hills or go to Jamaica Hospital. In Jamaica Hospital, unless it was a gunshot wound, you were more likely to just be killed automatically because they did not give a crap. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to this hospital in Queens, whatever. And, when I was there, I kept seeing things like ghosts around the hospital, or when I was there for nearly 2 months. And, one of the next experiences I had because they hadn't diagnosed me in quite some time. I was there for good, like 7 weeks before they told me what was wrong. And so I was basically just laying there dying while they were trying to figure it out, what was wrong with me. And I remember distinctly in my mind, I can still smell the flowery perfume, if that's even what it was, and feel her clothes on me. So I don't know if this was even a real person. It was the first and last time I saw her in that instance. But yeah, she presented as one of the cleaners at the hospital, and she had a Spanish accent and blonde hair and soft brown eyes. And she came in one day and she just, caressed my face. And why would someone cleaning the hospital come in and caress my face? And that in my mind, even though I was so messed up and so sick and basically dying, like, I could tell she was not a cleaning person. And she came in and caressed my face, and she just looked me in my eyes, and I was 17. I was totally jacked up. And she was just like, do you believe in God? And I was just like, yes, I do. She's like, you won't meet him yet, but just know that he's looking out for you, and just know that Jesus loves you no matter what. And I was just like, huh, okay. And then I passed out, and I never saw her again. But the feeling and the emotion that I got from her was that she was not a cleaning lady. She was some kind of like higher power of some kind.
You don't even think she was somebody that died in the hospital? You think
maybe she was an angel. Maybe she was, something otherworldly. Like, she didn't come off as a ghost. She came off as knowing more than a ghost would know, and knowing more than a human would know. And the feeling I got from her was so, and she smelled like lilies, and that's one of my favorite flowers. And I've heard from all the things I've read over the years that you will smell something that you like, or that's like familiar to you. And like lilies are very familiar to me because I love them.
Like if you meet an angel, you mean?
Yeah. If you meet
okay.
like an angel or something that's like otherworldly, something that's like connected to your soul, and that's that's usually the thing that they'll like. You'll smell like sometimes when I dream about my dad, I'll smell his leather jacket. And it's very much in my mind because when I was a little kid and he wore his leather jacket in the winter, I smelled it. It was more potent of a smell. And so anytime I dream about him, I smell leather, which is wild. But that kind of shows me that it is really him. But, it's based off of the things that I've heard from people, like dreaming about dead family members or having some kind of spiritual experience with something that's otherworldly. They'll smell something like that, and like flowers and like, think like sweet things are usually the things that they smell. That's what I've read over the years. And so that was my very first experience with that. Even though throughout my childhood, I would see ghosts all over our house in Queens. I kind of feel like it was haunted. But more than that, I feel like I was connected to them first, I guess, because, there are a lot of people on my mom's side of the family who have a sensitivity towards ghosts and towards, spirituality and towards all that stuff. And so before my mother got into hardcore evangelical Christianity, she was doing Santeria while she was going to the Baptist church because our upstairs neighbor was a Puerto Rican woman, and she got my mom into it because my mom was, she was a young mother and married my dad when she was 17, had me when she was 18. She had my brother when she was 19, my sister when she was 25, lost a whole bunch of kids in between. And, so she was trying to find herself by any means necessary, and sometimes that meant latching on. And I have nothing against Santeria at all. I just wish that people didn't just jump into certain things, especially like that, without fully understanding it. Because my mother told our pastor, First Baptist of Jamaica was where we went, and she told him about some of it, and he said, "No, you can't do that. That's the devil." And Santeria is not the devil. But he convinced her of that, and then she went and smashed all her statues, and then bad shit started happening around the house. And it's just like, Ma, you can't just stop something like that all willy-nilly because some pastor told you you're worshiping the devil, and then think that there are not going to be consequences. And so there were consequences. But we would see stuff around the house all the time, and all throughout my childhood, I saw ghosts and spirits and demons and weird things all around the house until I hit puberty, and that's when some of it stopped. But like, it was just very interesting growing up in a house where we were like, okay, we're going to go to church on Sunday, and then we're going to a private Muslim school during the week, and then I'm going to the Botanica with my mother to get some chicken's blood and cigars, and then I'm going to go back to the church during the week. And so it was very like all over the place. And that's, looking back on, I'm 38 now, looking back on it, I'm like, it was a very extremely multicultural kind of experience. I call my family the United Nations because we had so many different things going on in the house, being Black, being Palestinian, having Christianity and Islam, and tied in with very American ways of being. It was a very like, and it was sometimes very confusing, but I wouldn't honestly trade it for anything else. Like it helped me to become who I am now. So yeah, so that was my first experience, but it was my first experience with nearly dying, but it wasn't my first experience with the otherworldly realm. And when I was a little kid, like I would constantly sit around the house and talk to ghosts. From like 4 to like 10, I was just sitting around talking to ghosts in the house. And my mom would be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "You don't see that little boy over there? You don't see that he's messing with," like, because my mom made crafts and stuff. And I remember this so distinctly. Like she had these bunny hats for Easter, and they had like the tool, what are those fluffy thingies that they use to make look like fur, like hat, like ears and a bunny nose and eyes and all that stuff. And because some of these ghosts were little kids, they wanted to do kid things, and there were other little kids in the house, so they were just like, "I'm gonna mess with the bunny hats." But my mom always thought it was us, and it's just like, it's not us, it's those other kids. And she's like, "What other kids?" And I'm just like, "The ghost kids." And she's like, "Let's get some holy water on you." And I'm just like, what? My mom was really good at that, getting some holy water and like doing a cross on my forehead, and she had a little card that had a picture of white Jesus on it and a little prayer, and she'd like put the cross on my forehead and like stick the little card to my forehead and be like, "No more demons in the house." And I'm like, "Mom, they're really not demons. They're just kids who got lost along the way trying to find their way, and they're talking to me because I am very open to listening." And it was very interesting and very, very wild, to say the least. So that was my first, but that during my childhood, and then when I turned 17, that was my first like big interaction, with death. And another very wild thing that happened while I was in the hospital. So that was 2001 in September, and we all know what happened September 11th in New York City.
Yeah.
The day before it happened, I had a wild dream. I told Viviana and I have known each other since I was 15. So she was in my life during all that. And I talked to her on the phone that morning before the planes hit and told her about the dream I had the night before. And it was, there were a whole bunch of people running in the street in Midtown, and they were running away from something, and I couldn't tell what they were running away from. And I was walking towards where they were running from. And then suddenly I see all this smoke, all this gray smoke just falling and falling and falling. And I was looking for a kid. I don't know which kid. I don't know whose kid, but I was looking for them walking towards the smoke. And then I woke up. And I was just like, "What was that?" And then I told Viviana about it that morning, and she was just like, "Wow, that's freaky." And then not even 20 or 30 minutes later, I'm watching Channel 2, because CBS was the only station that was working the whole time, because all those satellites went down, all the towers, everything went down on all the buildings. Channel 2 was the only one that was working. So I was watching because there were primaries that morning. And as a teenager, I was always interested in my civic duty. So I'm like, "Oh, what are our voters working on today?" And so I started out Fox 5, and Fox 5 was watching it, and they watched as the plane hit the building, and then debris was falling. And I'm just like, that looks like, what is that? That's not normal. And then it cut out, and I was like, oh. And then another plane hit. I was like, oh. Does this have anything to do with that dream I just had a few hours ago? That is freaky as hell. But I would have dreams like that so often that it was just kind of like, well, this is okay. This is just how we're doing it. And I think it was honestly because I was so close to the other realm, because I was actively dying. They still hadn't diagnosed me yet. And I think that's why I was so open to seeing what was going to happen with that specifically, because it was such a huge death event. I mean, granted, we've had a lot more death events that have been larger than that happened since then. Hashtag COVID. But like, there's so many other, there was this, it was just a very, very interesting, weird thing to see when I was 17. When it was happening. So that was my first one of my first experiences with that. And then when I was 24, I went over to that. And from 17 to 24, I was very much struggling with my faith because I was just like, what is this bullshit? Who the heck is God to come up in my life and just disrupt things consistently on a regular basis? Why are you messing with me, bro? Like, what is the problem? What is the big deal? Like, I'm just trying to live as best as I can. And I don't know what's up with all this like death and jacked up stuff constantly happening. And my lupus was very, very hardcore with the flare ups from 17 till 30. It was just hardcore consistently. And I was just like, why? So I was very angry at 24 still. And then I went to visit my family in Palestine for a month. And on one hand, I got to spend a lot of time with my family, but on the other hand, I spent a lot of time alone because there were parts of the country they weren't allowed to go to, but I was because I'm an American. So I went to Jerusalem for 5 full days by myself, which was great. I went the first day with one of my aunts so she could show me around a little bit. And then I was like, okay, I got it. And I took the bus from Ramallah and went up into Jerusalem, was there by myself. And the second or third day that I went back to the Holy Sepulchre Church. And that's where they have the slab where Jesus was beat, and the not the final tomb, but one of the holding places for his body. And it's in this giant church. And it's all, I don't know if I could make it around that church now since I'm a double amputee now. And it was a lot of walking. But there were a lot of Russian and Greek pilgrims there as well. And everybody was just like walking around, touching everything to like sort of feel the Holy Spirit. And I was 24, so I was like, man, people are just being extra for no reason or because of the group. They're just doing it because everybody's doing it. That's why they're crying. That's why they're carrying on. But then I was like, well, I'm here. Let me try. So I had my Nikon DX40 with me. So I was taking pictures of everything. And I took a picture of the slab, which it's very beautiful. And I said, yeah, you know what? They're touching it. Let me touch it. And I knelt down to touch it. And when I say I felt whatever the hell that they were feeling in that moment, like it just like rushed all over me. And I instantly started crying. And I am not a big crier. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm not very emo. I don't really cry. But I touched it and I felt it. And I was just like, holy shit. Jesus is real. This is real. I was not prepared for that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a similar experience where I was like meditating with a Buddha statue. Like I felt like he was in the original Buddha, the Siddhartha Gautama. A lot of people think is the heavy set laughing Buddha, but that was another person who came later, but like the original one from India. And I kind of felt like his presence in the statue as I was meditating with it once.
Buddha, yes.
Oh, you cut out.
Yeah.
I just heard Buddha, yes.
No, I was agreeing with you. Like, and you know, I honestly come from the place of like at the time I was just like, Jesus is it, that's it. But as I got older, what I realized is very similar to like, I don't know if you've heard of the Baha'i faith.
I have heard of aren't they? Yeah, I think the Baha'i faith isn't that the one that they're not allowed that like they take an oath of celibacy or?
No, they don't. They don't take no. Yeah. So it's sort of like an offset. It's similar to Christianity, and Oprah follows it as well. She opened this really huge Baha'i temple in Chicago, and when I first discovered the Baha'i, I was like, that sounds pretty accurate. What the Baha'i believe is that we are all worshiping the same God, but with different names. And at first, I was like, nah, that's kind of, I don't believe that. But then when I read more and more of their information about the way they believe it and the connectivity between us and how we, like, different cultures and different institutions had to come up with these different kinds of gods to sort of help people to understand where we're coming from and what faith means, and based on like who we are racially, who we are culturally, who we are spiritually. It made so much more sense to me that like they, different places would come up with all these different kinds of things to describe one different being.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think too, and also
Yeah.
that like and whatever wherever you go, like with the afterlife, I think maybe everybody kind of goes where they believe they're gonna go, or if
Yeah.
you don't believe in afterlife, maybe you don't go to. But there's some people who kind of find a comfort. Like I know a lot of people want a comfort in life after death, but there's also people like when I was writing down the stuff for this show, there was also like Mark Twain. He was saying like he didn't fear death because he'd been dead for billions of years before he was born anyway. And there was also a philosopher, Epicurus, I think I pronounced that right. He said that death is nothing to fear because we won't feel it when it comes anyway, and the like life is just about enjoying the sensations and the feelings while we're alive, and like when we die, it's just the end of those sensations. So there's nothing to fear with that. But I guess my view is kind of like you kind of become one with everything and go back into everything. But I also believe in ghosts because like I've had experiences with ghosts as well. But I think like ghosts are kind of like people who die. Usually it's like a tragic death, and then
Mm-hmm.
like they have unfinished business. Like they weren't ready to die. There was something they needed
Mm-hmm.
to finish here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I believe that there are multiple realms of being. Like on one hand, that there are totally ghosts. I have been haunted in my younger years. I ran into ghosts along the way. I've ran into people who were very obsessed. Like in my younger years, I hung out with a lot of folks who were Wiccans, but they were doing things that were like a little devilly, just a little. They forgot about the nature worship and they were going straight to the devil. And I'm like, what? It is because they wanted, they wanted. I think the bottom line was is that they wanted some answers, and so they thought that that was an easy way because he'll listen. And I'm like, oh, you do that over there. Please don't bring that energy to me, because they kept trying. I think that they saw that I had something, not sure, they weren't sure what it was, but it was something, some kind of energy, and they wanted to use that energy to call these very, I wouldn't say dark forces, but I would say like opposing forces. And I'm never down with being used, and I'm never down with like calling something that will, come back up 15 or 20 years later and be like, remember that thing that you agreed to? I'm here for your soul. Like, not into that at all. But yeah, but when I went to, dang, this thing keeps on.
Oh, cut out on mine.
Yeah, no, when I went, I fully felt, you know, I felt it. And then once I realized when I was 24 that, oh yeah, Jesus is, you know, legit. And that also we were all worshiping different gods, but with the same names. I was with different names. Like I realized that like there's so much more to us than just these physical bodies. There's so much more to us than even just with our souls. And there are so many different ways of being. So like when you were saying, that quote from Mark Twain, I totally believe that, because, similar to like those movies like The Fountain or Cloud Atlas, like I really believe those are closer to reality than people realize. Like I have had several past lives, and I've remembered them and throughout different times in my life, which is very, very trippy to remember when you were here before and realizing that you're back again because you didn't learn whatever lesson you were meant to learn.
I remember there was a period like when I could remember stuff before I was born. That's another thing. Like I could remember
Mm-hmm.
stuff that like my family said happened with my sister when she was young, like walking around like a park, and they said, "Oh, you weren't there." So it's almost like I think I kind of remember like being like the pre-life, kind of like checking out
Mm-hmm.
who my family was going to be, who I was going to be, But that's kind of like the movie Soul kind of did something like that, where there was like the great before and the great beyond.
Yeah, no, and I feel like that there are lots of those, and just like you said, like there are some people who believe that there's an afterlife, and some people who don't. But I think regardless, we go somewhere. That we, our the energy that's in us, that's controlling the meat suit. It's electric. It's alive. It goes beyond this body, just like it goes beyond your body, and it's got to go somewhere. And it doesn't just evaporate into space. It goes somewhere, especially because some of us have much stronger energies and light. So it wouldn't make sense at all if we were just gonna evaporate into nothing. So I totally believe that.
But I also think like there's spirituality, like definitely like certain sects of Buddhism, and also like it may be like more the mystics. Oh.
Certain sects of Buddhism.
Yeah, and also the mystical sides of the religions that, to me, kind of view those religions as more allegories. Like I feel like they don't necessarily believe in. I mean, I don't know about the mystic, but like I know like certain sects of Buddhism, there's certain like more like secular people who follow the ideas of Buddhism, don't believe in an afterlife, but they kind of think that life is beautiful for its impermanence, and because we're not like there's nothing after, like the fact that things are impermanent and don't go on forever kind of makes them more like precious in a way. And then that's the spirituality, is accepting the death, accepting the impermanence, and making peace. So I think that's like another way that some people go, is like not believing in an afterlife, but kind of the fact that there is no afterlife and this is not permanent makes it life more valuable. Than like accepting the death and not fearing death is like how you. I think that's like one of the parts of like it. Like enlightenment to some people too.
Yeah, no, and I feel like it can honestly be both. Like on one hand, like I do believe that there's an afterlife, but that doesn't also, in my mind, give me permission to be an asshole while I'm in this life. Like I don't care that this is not permanent. I'm not going to be a dick while I'm here simply because I'm going someplace after. Because there's a lot of Christians who are like that. They're like, oh, I'm just going to be an asshole to everyone while I'm here. And because I'm going someplace else, and as long as I'm a Christian, it's all good. No. Yeah. I don't think Jesus is down with you, buddy. If you're going to be an asshole to everyone while you're here, what do you think that's going to have? What kind of cause? What kind of effect do you think that's going to have on your soul?
Yeah, or just like doing a bunch of bad stuff, and then like you repent, or I accept Jesus now, so it's all good. Like all the terrible stuff.
And it's not like it's not like similar to with like Egyptian folklore. It's not like there's. I don't honestly think there's like a scale being like, oh, were you good, were you bad, or whatever, and you one side of the scale is going to outweigh another. I don't think it's that black and white, but I do think that they do pay attention to how good we were as a person, and how we were received, and also like, were we being hypocritical? Were we making things difficult for other people?
Yeah, and that was in ancient Egypt. That was they go to everybody goes to the underworld.
Yeah,
is what I was reading, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but I think it's also like the body, like they preserve the body because like the body was supposed to live on, but then the soul goes to the underworld. It's like
and it's very like so again, I don't think it's like that cut and dry with like a weight of all the good and bad, but I do think that somebody, who the heck knows who, is paying attention to the good and bad things that we're doing, and making sure that we're not just constantly being like I not to say that like I'm the freaking pinnacle of goodness and greatness and doing all kinds of good things, but I do think that there's some people, kind of Republicans, who are probably not going to the good place after that. And that being said, I don't also believe that hell is a real place. I think that hell is the social construct that the church came up with to make people afraid to live their lives And people now think, ooh, hell is a thing, woohoo, except hell's not really mentioned in the Bible. So you're going to have to come up with some new punishment for folks. And, I think if we were just less judgmental to people and to ourselves, we'd be more accepting instead of being not accepting at all.
Why view it kind of like the allegorical perspective, like maybe like heaven and hell are all things on earth, like even Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you. So I kind of view I view the Bible allegorically and like other religions allegorically, and I think it's kind of similar to like the Buddha talking about like the Dharma within. So I don't necessarily view it as like a place you go after you die. It's more like creating the heaven on earth.
100%, yes. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just think it's, I don't think we as humans can like fully understand like what's going to happen after. Like we can imagine it. We can, think about it based on all these different texts about what might happen and what might not happen, whether there's an afterlife or not. But like, I think that there's so much more going on than we can ever understand, that it's sort of beyond anything that we can even imagine, even whether there's a heaven or not, but I agree with that too. I do think that we can definitely make, heaven within us and heaven on this earth. That being said, though, the world makes it extremely hard to do that, with, classism and racism and sexism and homophobia and ableism and all these things. And so it makes it hard to say, yes, I'm going to be happy in my space. I'm going to be happy right where I am. I can make heaven anywhere I am, but I'm starving and I'm homeless and I'm sick and I can't find a job. Like things like that, like make it hard to make it happen here.
Well, that kind of comes to the root, like compartmentalizing people and like viewing them as separate, like from you. And then that's why, like, it's the same thing. Like how you're saying, like it's the same God manifesting different forms. I kind of view it as like the self, like we're all the same self, like manifesting different forms, like because of different experiences and stuff. But then we view each other as separate, or we divide by like class, like we try to put people in boxes or like oppress people. But it's like, because we're disconnected from the fact that like we're all like the same, but like manifesting in different forms, and like we become different. And
the Baha'i also believe in like connecting us as a community, recognizing that like not only are we worshiping different gods that are all the one same, but we are all different people, but we are all one and the same. And if we built community together and cared more about each other in a sort of like communal way, the world would be a better place. But unfortunately, people are like, oh, that's socialism. So what's socialism? Like caring about your neighbor, or making sure that they have, food and stuff, or making sure that they have a house, knowing that they'll do the same for you? How is it that like the literal teachings of Jesus are being turned into socialism simply because you care about a human being? Like, it's just so wild to me that folks are just like, that's socialism. Like, when did we all become like libertarians who don't give a crap about our neighbors?
Yeah. Well, then the libertarians' argument against that I see is like, oh, well, he was saying you should do it. He wasn't saying the government should force them to do it. Like that's usually
like,
what the response they say. Like they think people should choose to like do the generosity, and then but they don't agree with like the government forcing people. But it's like I don't know. I think like certain things need to be in law, like child labor laws and stuff too. I mean, I can understand like the skepticism of like, do you trust the government to do like this? But it's like I think they kind of need to balance each other out. Like if you put too much central power into one thing, like you put in too much like big government or too much like big corporations, then it's like
I agree with that.
The problem is the big. Actually, like my friend actually said that to me recently. It's not big business. It's not big government. The problem is the big.
Yes, I agree.
That's like a whole other podcast.
No, totally. And I feel like if we all like just contributed just a little bit to each other, and then didn't necessarily rely on these bigger institutions, but still did get a little bit of help, and got a little bit of help from them and a little bit of help from our community, we'd go so much farther. And unfortunately, it's everybody wants an all or nothing, and then we get what we get.
Yeah.
It's wild to me that folks are just like all or nothing with all this stuff, and I'm just like, but no, wow, it's not. It's just very, very wild to me.
Yeah, getting back to religion is
Yes,
kind of
yes,
like an
yes.
all. People view it as like an all or nothing. Like, oh,
Yeah.
there's no God, there's nothing, or there's like this divine entity in the sky, like telling you you should do this, you shouldn't do that, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, to me, like I think it's more like complicated. Like I don't really believe with like agree with a fundamentalist or like an atheist. Like I'm kind of because I like I said, I look at it in a more allegorical way. I think like it's
Mm-hmm.
more like I don't I think that the idea of God is just like this being in the sky that's like oh that's too human like for me. Like I think like God is like more of an abstract thing. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
within all of us. It's everything. I think Taoism is probably more where my beliefs find because I
Mm-hmm.
even though like I don't call myself a Taoist because like I always feel like I'm following like this kind of path, like this spiritual path,
Mm-hmm.
or like a lot of my friends recently always hear me saying this spiritual journey. Like to me, that's like
Mm-hmm.
my journey, like my Tao that I follow.
Yeah,
Um,
I totally agree with that. And every time I talk to other folks who are Christian, they're like, "You're not really a Christian. You don't live your life that way." And I'm just like, "Why? Because I'm not an asshole to people? Because I don't go around beating people in the head with scripture? Because I'm not forcing people to believe in Jesus?" Guess what? Jesus didn't want us forcing people to believe in him. He wanted
yeah,
us to
and he hung
come
around with like
willing.
the people that they look down on in society. Like he hung around, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah,
like
he
prostitutes. He hung around, I think, too. Like in a
and he
yeah,
hung out with disabled folks and he hung out with poor folks. He went and flipped tables at churches. He was like, "This is bullshit. Y'all just taking people's money and not actually helping anyone. So F you, F you, F you, F you." Like, do you guys not understand? Like, Jesus was like a brown organizer trying to like dismantle the system that was
yeah,
not helping anybody. Like, y'all would not be down with him right now. You would probably lock him up in jail because he'd be at a Black Lives Matter protest or a pro choice protest. You'd probably just say, "That's not Jesus." You wouldn't believe him for what he was saying and who he is, but that's how he lived his life. And so when I talk to other Christians, I'm just kind of like, where did you learn to be this way? But that's the way a lot of these churches are. And they want it that way so that they can have an us and them mentality and just to say, well, we're going to heaven and you're not because you're a sinner and you're this and that. Like my mother is like the perfect example of somebody who's very much like that now. And even to the point where she's like, oh well, it's even a smaller portion of people who are going to heaven now because everybody's just living in sin. Oh my God. And I'm just like, do you really think Jesus gives a crap about someone having premarital sex or someone being in a same-sex relationship or someone not getting married at a certain time or popping
yeah,
out kids at a certain time? Or no, he wants us to be good to
yeah.
our neighbors.
So it's
He
like, and
wants.
I also was thinking like this all-knowing being, like he's just like viewing billions of people. Like he's not looking like if they did something terrible, like or something like that. Or it's just like, oh, this person.
Yeah.
They're looking at the billions, and
Mm-hmm.
they, oh, that one person had premarital sex, or that
Mm-hmm.
one person listened to a death metal album out of billions of people. They're gonna go to hell because of that. Like,
I can't tell you how many times my mother thought I was worshiping Satan because I listened to like Marilyn Manson, and I was just like, first of all, in my teens, his beats slapped. They were great. It was awesome. Now I know that he's an asshole. Now I know that. But back then, it was just music. There was no devil whatsoever. And I'm just kind of like, Mom, are you do you fully understand what you're asking me and what you're telling me at like 16 years old? Or are you just making assumptions because the news told you that kids are worshiping the devil now and Marilyn Manson is an easy scapegoat? Um, so it's just wild to me that that folks are always quick to judge simply because they like I used to answer the door in like a Nine Inch Nails or Marilyn Manson t-shirt when the Jehovah's Witnesses would come by on Saturday because that was an easy way to get them to go away because they were making assumptions. And I'm just kind of like, fine, you want to make an assumption, you go right ahead. I have nothing to do with you. You have nothing to do with me. And you're just making some blanket assumption about me. And you don't know anything about anything that I'm doing with myself or my life. So it's, people just constantly make assumptions, whether it's about religion or whether it's about faith or whether it's about experience, without actually getting to know people. And some folks might be like, oh, you're doing the same thing for all those like conservative people and all those like uber religious people. Like, no, I'm not. I'm going off of how they've treated other people like me. And I'm going off of how I've interacted with them. Like, I can't tell you how many times in like my early 30s, I was still on Facebook regularly. And I'd go like, it was very silly of me to go on the Fox News message board and say anything, because as soon as anyone sees my name or sees my face, they're like, go back to your country. Or they're like, you can't possibly be a Christian. Oh, you Obama-loving liberal. And I'd be like, first of all, I was born in Queens, New York. So kick rocks barefoot. Also, I did not love everything Obama did. So also kick rocks barefoot. And also, you and your racist ass things are not going to take away from my own personal faith, or your assumptions are not going to take away from my faith. So it's just kind of like, why are folks constantly assuming things about people that have nothing to do with anything? And it has to go with their own personal bias. But we could probably do a freaking podcast about that for hours and hours and hours.
Well, actually, the way I've been appreciating some of the Bible is through Neville Goddard's writing, because he was pretty much like, he wasn't even, I guess some people actually in the introduction, some people said you could call him an atheist, but like he appreciated the Bible from an allegorical perspective. Like they weren't actual. It's not like giving a history lesson. It's more the characters within. Even though like there were some real places and people, but like they represent more like aspects within ourselves. Like the different characters are like allegories for like aspects in ourselves. And he was saying like the God is the God within you, and then you were the create like. And then he talked about a lot of things also, like he was sort of like the precursor to a lot, like one of the precursors to the whole law of attraction thing, but I think the way he talked about it was deeper. Like there was more of a depth to it. It was more about like focusing on being like your highest self, like the highest self.
Who was that guy again? Because I'm very curious about that.
Neville Goddard, Neville Goddard. And actually, the one who taught him, like in his mysticism, was an Ethiopian Jew that studied the Kabbalah, and like he was the one who like taught him all this stuff. Like he became a mystic through like his teaching.
Nice. I love reading things like that. Like years ago, I used to listen to this podcast called Mysterious Universe, and they talked about all kinds of things like this. And then I had to stop talking because I had to stop listening to them. They're my age. I had to stop listening to them because they're in Australia, and they first began their podcast being very like open to like all kinds of ways of political thinking. And then as they got older, you saw they got more and more conservative. And most recently they got so conservative that I was following one of the podcast guys on Twitter, and I followed him back. I followed him. And he straight up blocked me, like before I even said anything to him. And then I listened to one of his recent podcasts, and I realized that he was touting some American Republican talking points. And I'm like, oh, so you've just fully drunk the Kool-Aid. You just went all the way off on the whole deep end. Yeah. Okay, we'll not listen to that anymore.
Well, I think that's the new, like a lot. I saw a lot of people I followed that were like more left leaning or just like libertarian, kind of went in that direction. Like when Trump, because it became like that's the counterculture thing, or like that's the rebel thing, is to be like this right wing.
Yeah, and
that's just like the contrarian. Like I'm not going to just side with a view because it's against the mainstream. Like I'm going to side with something because I agree with it. Like
yeah, you don't have to like go.
Like people, they started jumping on a trend too. Like whatever's the opposing view, whatever's the.
It's just wild that they went that route, because here they are talking about like mysticism and like the fourth and fifth dimension and aliens and ghosts and spirits and magic. But then they throw in all these like right-wing talking points. And I'm like, what the hell is this? This is
Even if you
not.
look at you look at Alex Jones, I don't think he was ever good, but like if you look at him, like during the Bush years, he was talking against like the whole like warrantless wiretap. He was talking against like the FBI like doing stuff like to Muslims and stuff because he thought 9/11 was an inside job and
Mm-hmm.
everything. But then he started getting more and more like with the racists and all that stuff like towards
Exactly.
like the Obama years and then the Trump. So I think it was just like that group of like the
Mm-hmm.
conspiracy people
Mm-hmm.
kind of just went for more and more. And like with Trump, it got even worse. Like because that
Yeah.
just became the more contrarian view.
That was totally the contrarian view, and it's just kind of like, okay, so now I don't have any pod podcasts like that to listen to because
Yeah.
I can't listen to the shit in the middle because it's wild. And in the very beginning of Alex Jones and his whatever you want to call it, I was watching some of his videos way back in the day in the late 90s because he was actually, I wouldn't say normal, but he wasn't saying any like racist or jacked up things back then. And then suddenly he just went pew off in the
Yeah.
whole another direction. And I'm just like, when did that happen? Oh, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be listening to this. Maybe I shouldn't be paying any attention
Yeah.
to this because I don't know where that came from, but I can't vibe with it. Like, so it's, yeah. Um,
Oh yeah, we getting back to like the afterlife and
mm-hmm.
all
Oh,
that.
yeah, yeah, we just.
Yeah, you were mentioning like earlier, like ancient Egypt, like there's no good, there's no
Mm-hmm.
bad. It's Shinto.
Mm-hmm.
There's no heaven really. There's just a spiritual. There's the you. They have an underground realm too, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's Izanami is like the
Mm-hmm.
goddess of the dead. But I
Mm-hmm.
think she was like a goddess that died, and then she went to the underworld too. Like so, it's
Mm-hmm.
like a similar thing with the Shinto. But I think the Shinto they believe that like the dead come back to the earth then as spirits, like through they have like ancestor worship. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's them. So
And
that's another interesting concept.
that's also something that happens with like some West African tribes that they'll also worship their ancestors as well to keep the energy from the ancestors in there, especially if you have ancestors who have partook in like any kind of magical things or had like psychic abilities or anything that they can help you from the afterlife in this life, which I've always been very fascinated about. And
Yeah.
in my younger years, I totally believed, and I still believe it to some extent, that like if you pray to an ancestor or multiple ancestors, that you can get their energy to sort of intervene with whatever it is that's going on. So I constantly like, and granted, like I'll pray to my ancestors anyway, just to like pray to them. But like anytime I want to talk to like my grandmother or my father or anyone on my mother's side who had those like magical inclinations, like I'll just say, hey y'all, can I get a little bit of support with this or a little bit of guidance with this? And I often feel their energy, which is great because having that kind of tie to folks in the other realm is it makes me feel multiple things, but most importantly, it shows me that like they went someplace good.
Right.
Wherever the heck it is, they went someplace good, and that I still have those ties to them, even if it's just in my sleep and even if it's just in my prayers, that I have these ties to the folks who are no longer here.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think there is a bit of because like even my father before he married my mother, he was like dating my mother. He had like a visitation from
mm-hmm.
this guy who looked kind of like me, but with like a reddish beard. This is like before I was
Mm,
born, but he was wearing like a 19th century or early 1900s, so like late 1800s like garb, and he was kind
mm-hmm.
of checking him over, like
Hmm.
is this the man? Like, and he and her friend, he wasn't the only one that saw that entity
Mm-hmm.
either. And then my mother like had a visitation, like in her mind's eye, she had someone that
Mm-hmm.
like a dark haired woman, like follow like, but like that felt like a lot of sorrow and stuff like it, like but was like observing her. And like
Mm.
my dad said, oh, that was my mother that you just described.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
also saw a vision of my great grandmother Dora before we even knew about her,
Mm.
and like we saw a picture. I saw a picture of her later on, and like, oh, that was her. So
See, and I wish more people share. Like, I feel like there are a lot more stories like that than we realize, but people don't want to share them because they're like, oh, I don't want anyone to think I'm crazy or like I got some like weird things going on in my brain. It's just like, but we all have these kinds of visions and all these kinds of experiences, and if we all talked about it, then we would sort of normalize, experiencing otherworldly events in our day-to-day life. Like, I feel like it's very normal, and it's just talked about in such a way where we're made to feel like we're weirdos when we're not weirdos. It is actually very normal.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think like what other it's gonna go. Oh, and actually, speaking of Judaism, because like that was I was talking about my ancestors a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
on like my mother's side, like the guy who had the red beard. I think he was like a rabbi or something that
Mm.
he had a vision of. But there was actually one video saying that like the concept of the afterlife and all that, like it was uncertain. I should know more about Judaism. Ironically, like that's the one I've dived into like the least. It's like Judaism and like the different
Mm.
views. So people ask me like, do Jews do this? Do Jews do that? I'm like, I don't know, because like it's also like kind of like a heritage too. Like your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like a religion for me really. Like I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really like raised that way, but
Mm-hmm.
like also like the video said it's unclear what happens to after like there wasn't like as concrete of like an idea of an afterlife in Judaism that came more with Christianity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, and I didn't feel the full weight of the afterlife until I was 25, and that was my second like hardcore experience with nearly dying. I was in the hospital again, and from 17 to 25 I was in the hospital a lot because my lupus flares would not calm down, and that time I got something called severe neuropathy where I was paralyzed from the neck down out of nowhere. Randomly happened. They have no idea why it happened and how I got better, how I got my movement back. That's why my hands are like this, because I was paralyzed. And I was in the hospital for two and change months. And they gave me chemo, they did dialysis, they threw every drug in the book at me. And then one night, I honestly feel like this was happening. One of the nurses was trying to mercy kill me and gave me blood pressure medication. And my blood pressure has historically been low. So she gave me some blood pressure medication that dropped it to 80 over 40. And I was completely unresponsive for like 5 hours. They thought I was going to die. Um, and I was out of my body for I don't know how long, but I was seeing what they were doing to me while I was laying on the hospital bed. And they couldn't find any veins anymore because I had been in the hospital so long. So I saw them from over my body putting a vein in my leg, in my right leg. And this was before I had my amputations happen. And it was so trippy to be outside of my body. And this was during the day, but it was nighttime and daytime at the same time, which is very weird. And, I still remember it, that it was just such a freaky feeling being outside of my body and knowing that it was not my time to go yet. I had this very, very strong feeling that no, I can't leave yet. I have to be here. Why am I outside of my body? And they just kept smacking me and smacking me, trying to wake me up. And I finally came to, and they gave me some Narcan to just get everything out of my system. And I finally woke up. But I still remember that floaty, weightless feeling, and that it was so just warm and loving, but it wasn't my time to go yet. And I still think about that constantly, that it wasn't my time to go yet. And granted, it's been 13 years since that happened. But that feeling never leaves you, that like you were dead. Wasn't your time to go. And they forced you back into your body. Like, no, not yet. And I feel like that's happened so many times that like, I've nearly died and the universe is like, nah, son, you still got mad work to do. I don't know what you thought you're trying to like skip out on town yet. No, you can't come home yet. You still gotta be here.
What did you freeze her?
Yeah, so I that was and it was very trippy to come back into that, and because when you're weightless and you're not feeling anything on this world, but then you come back, you suddenly feel it's like being in the ocean and you're weightless in the ocean, and then you come out of the ocean and your body suddenly feels heavy again. My body felt very heavy once I came back into it. But I just had this, and since that happened, I've had this very, very strong feeling that like something, not sure what, but something otherworldly wants me here, and they're going to make sure, come hell or high water, no matter what's going on with my health, that I am here, which is trippy to realize that like the universe wants you here to do something. Still not sure what. I mean, I've been doing all kinds of community work for so many years, but I'm still not sure what the ultimate goal is of me being here. Like, because I was down to be out. I was like, all right, bring me home. Let's go. I want to go to heaven. But they just, I just got this feeling like, no, you are meant to be here. And sometimes I get the feeling as to why, like, I met my husband years later. I met, so many other people along the way who I've, they've improved my life and I've improved their lives. And like, so maybe that has something to do with it. And like, I'm doing, many more good things, but I got the distinct feeling that like I have a purpose and I have to be here to do it. And I can't do it from elsewhere. I have to be here in this body, in this life, doing whatever it is, which is a trippy thing to realize that like the universe has like not everything is just random. Sometimes I feel like things are just a random fluke, but to know in my heart of hearts that like the universe wants me here to do something is a very trippy thing, because I'm like, first of all, I didn't sign up to be here in the first place. Why am I given all these freaking responsibilities with no help whatsoever from the higher power to do it? Just be like, here you go, go do it. And I'm like, but how am I supposed to? It's wild.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes I kind of view deer as like my spirit guides in a way, like recently, because I remember one time like I was thinking about something, and maybe I was in the wrong state of mind about something, and then I see dead deer on the road, and then I'm someone who like struggles with depression and that kind of stuff, so like sometimes I'll think like I get like negative ruminations about stuff, and I'll be like, oh, what's the point, why am I here, like what do I do, like all this like negative stuff, and then am I doing? But then then in those moments, like, or if I'm thinking like, oh, am I in the right? Am I thinking the right thing with this? Then I'll see a deer, or I'll see something that has to do with a deer. So that's why I kind of got the idea that like deer, and then they'll like kind of look at me like they notice me. That's just, I don't know. That's something recently I kind of thought, like, I don't know, like they're kind of like my guardians in a way.
Yeah, and like I feel like that there's a lot of that. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's not a sign. What are you talking about? You're being silly." What's the thing where you see a pattern where there isn't a pattern? They call it like that. Like, "Oh, you're seeing a pattern."
And, yeah. I'm going to do a whole other podcast on that, but like,
and I'm like, but there is a pattern. Yeah. There's like, how is it that there are so many different things? Any possibility can happen in the universe. And certain things happen in a way that seems like it's on purpose. That seems like it's a sign. That cannot be an accident. That cannot be some fluke. There's some purpose to it. And when folks are like, no, you're just reaching. No. Why is it a reach? Other things aren't a reach, but what I'm saying about me seeing signs, about me being here, is a reach. Like, I don't think it is. And I don't think it's also my brain making things up or your brain making things up. I think that there are some actual signs of it. And, you know, if people just paid attention or were more open-minded to it, they would see it, or they would feel it, or they would experience it. And I think because, you know, when I came around, there was barely any technology, especially not for like regular folks. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have a computer, we didn't have, you know, we had barely had dial-up internet. And I think with more technology sort of like whooshing through the atmosphere, it's closed us off even more from our spirituality and from these experiences. And, you know, what would happen if it was suddenly just go off and we didn't have these things anymore? Would we be open to it again? Or
I also think that maybe sometimes, like, because everybody has their own individual path,
Yeah.
like maybe certain signs would only be shown to, they'd be shown to you, but not everybody else, because that's your path. It's not their path.
No, totally. And some people are just chosen by whoever to see these things, and some people just aren't. And I'm not sure.
But also might like apply to, like, the sign would be like, that's a sign because like of your path of what you need to do with your purpose. Or like someone else will see a sign that has to do. But this is like going to be like, I'm going to do I have a whole other episode planned on like coincidence, whether it's like coincidences or miracles and signs. But like, I mean, that kind of relates to this too, but still.
You know, that just reminds me of like the multiverse, that like, you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson believes that we're in like a multiverse, and there are infinite Earths and infinite versions of ourselves. It just depends on like what path you go down. And I'm constantly thinking of the other Emans, and are they happy? Are they living the way they want to live? Like, because I always think about if I went left instead of right, if I went up instead of down, like my life would be completely
like every decision
different.
Every second.
Exactly. You know, and there are constantly different versions. And, you know, I totally believe the way he believes, like there are infinite possibilities. And so I'm totally satisfied. And maybe that's sort of also a Buddhist way of thinking, that because we live in a multiverse and there are a million versions of me all over the place, I'm satisfied with how my life is now, because it's exactly the way it's supposed to be, because those other lives are exactly the way they're supposed to be. And so I'm not bothered by a lot of things that are going on here, because this is the way it's supposed to be here. Now, some people might say, oh, but what about free will? Like we've got, you know, we have a choice to do this, and the third. I'm like, well, that's part of the multiverse, because if you go this way, you're making a choice to go that way. And if you're going that way, you're making a choice to go that way. And that sort of divides which way it's going and creates a whole nother realm of whatever it is. And I'm just constantly, you know, maybe that's just like the organizer in me, but I'm constantly thinking about, you know, whether those other versions of me are happy and living lives that they like fully love. And I don't know.
I think that's what some people say about like manifesting is like you're kind of just tapping in mentally to that like that path, like in the future, so that you're kind of changing the future. And Neville Goddard was talking about like going into like a dream in that book I was reading. It was like a collection of all his work. He was talking about like controlling the future through like a dreamlike state, like and imagining it, and then through that dreamlike state, like those events would happen in the future. But I think that's also like a shamanistic idea too. Like that's how they'd like they'd find like the hunt or game is like through meditations in like a dreamlike state. And then
no, totally. And this is one of the reasons why I can't vibe with a lot of other Christians, because they're like, you're thinking things that are not down with Christianity. And I'm like, do you know that Jesus hung out with Buddhists, and Jesus hung out with folks of like other Eastern religions between 12 and 30. And he was down with everybody. He was just like, yo, y'all are good people. You're not hurting your neighbors. You're helping people out. You're being a good person. Like, I can vibe with that. And that's exactly how I feel. Like, I'm not going to try to force someone into Christianity or force them to change around their beliefs simply because I believe something. That's between me and God. And their relationship is also between them and God. And I have no control over whatever somebody else thinks or believes, and nor do I want control over what someone else believes. And so that's one of the reasons why folks are just like, you're not really a Christian. Man, fuck out of here. What you mean? Like, you really think Jesus is going to be down with you force feeding someone and beating them into submission? Like, no, he's not even remotely. And so, like, I totally believe that, like, you know, multiple religions can exist and should exist because we are all very different people with so many different backgrounds and beliefs and experiences that it makes sense to have multiple different kinds of beliefs in a world with like 8 billion people. Like, we can't all be believing the same. Like, this isn't Westworld. We're not all freaking robots.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, when we were saying that whatever you believe, that's where you go when you die. I wonder if, like, you know, the few who still worship, like, the ancient Greek gods or whatever, is like, there's like 5-10 people up there. Like, then they're like, oh, you know, it's gotten quiet here after a while.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if, like, there's like the religions, like, that don't have as many, or like the Egyptian gods, or they. Well, I mean, there's the underworld. Like, I don't know if there's like, oh, maybe
No.
there's like 5-10 people now who go to that underworld. I don't know.
I don't know. And that's, I think that's even a bigger question of, like, past religions, like similar to, like, you ever see, what was that American Gods, that show
Oh, I didn't see
where,
it yet.
yeah, I mean, I read the first book, years ago, back when it was still in paperback in the 90s. And, the show was very interesting like that. And when a religion was dying, the god would be there, but they become less powerful. And I thought about that too while watching the show. Like, what happens to these gods and to these afterlives when they become less popular or less, I guess, less down with the current times, because a lot of the old gods were sort of like phasing out, and then these new gods would come in with, like, technology, and there was like a social media god and all that stuff, because social media, there's a lot of people who basically worship it. And so that was a question that they were bringing up as well. And I think that's a very valid question. Like, what happens when there's some, like, super ancient religion, like with the Greek gods? Are there only, like, 10 or 15 people in the afterlife? Who the heck knows? And is there a separate afterlife, or is it like, similar to, like, with like that show Supernatural, everybody has their own room, but not just their own room for themselves, but all the iterations of them have their own separate rooms and separate afterlives. And so if you came back 20 times, you've got 20 different rooms, and everybody's different and everybody has a different personality, so they all have different ways of being in that afterlife. Or is it just one specific place where everybody's just hanging out? Or is it, different depending on, like, if you got remarried or married multiple people, or had a completely wild life. Like, it just honestly depends. And I don't know, again, I don't know what is real. I just know from my own personal experience that, like, I'm gonna have a pretty cool afterlife. And I hope that there's some people from this life that are there. But if they're not, I think that I would honestly be okay with that, because it'd be my afterlife, and it would be specifically designed for me, and I'd be down with it, regardless of what's going on there and who will be there, because it will be specifically designed for me. So it's, but also, like, I'm okay with getting there whenever I get there. Like, after my first experience nearly dying when I was a teenager, I kind of, I realized in that moment, even at 17, I hadn't done much with my life at 17, but I was totally okay with going out then and there. And looking back at it, 20 something years later, I'm still okay with going whenever it's my time, because I know that I have done good while I've been here, but I haven't done it because, I want the credit or I want to do it for the culture. Like, I did it because I just want to help people, regardless of what's going on with them or what's going on with me. I just want to help people. And I hope, that, I don't know, whatever higher power that there is, whether it's Jesus or some, flying pizza in the sky, recognizes that like I just wanted to help people in whatever instance, no matter what, and that I hope that whatever plan that they have for me while I'm here, that I actually was successful at it. Because again, I don't know what the heck the plan is. I don't know what I'm supposed to be here for. It just feels like helping people is the right thing to do and is part of my plan. And, I hope that I'm living up to whatever expectations the universe has for me. I hope that I'm living up to whatever those are. I don't know. Again, I don't know. I've gotten no script for it, no guidance. I've just got the feeling that I am supposed to be here and got, bolted back into my body at 25 and I'm, still here. And, and when I had my other, my last near-death experience when I was 29, when I was going through all my leg stuff, I don't remember too many of the details because I was so drugged up. But I also still got that feeling that, guess what? You are going to be okay. You are still going to be alive because you are meant to be here. And you might come out a little beaten up, but you're still meant to be here. And, nearly 10 years later, I am still here. I'm still kicking butt. And I'm still very much, tied into I am here for a reason. And whatever the reason is, I'm still here. I still haven't figured out what the heck it is. But I'm here for whatever purpose it is. And all I know though is the bottom line is that I was not just meant to pay bills and die. Like that is the one thing that I am very, very confident in. Like none of us as human beings were meant to just be born to pay bills and die. Like we have a greater purpose than that. And I know that my purpose is also greater than that, because just sitting around and paying bills and then dropping dead at the end, no bueno. I'm not down with that. Like, and I don't think anybody should be down with that. We have a greater purpose, whatever it is, whether it's to be happy ourselves or to make other people happy or to do good and spread joy. And to just generally not be dicks to people. Like, I'm down with that way of thinking. So, I don't know if that was just a long-winded answer of, I've got a greater purpose or what. Yeah. But like, that's just where I come from. And, as I approached 39, still can't believe I'm at this age, that like, I just want to keep on doing good things for people and helping people along the way and hoping that I am living in whatever the purpose is that the universe has for me, whatever the heck it is. Because, I feel like that's the right thing to do. And I honestly feel like that's what Jesus would do. If I think about it in a deeper way, I honestly feel like Jesus would be down with the things that I've done and how I've lived my life. And not to say that I've always been perfect or I've always been a good person. I'm human. I do make mistakes, as any human does. I just hope that the good things I do outweigh the bad. Even though I don't think that they're weighing the good and bad things, I still want the good things that I've done to outweigh whatever things that might be considered or perceived of as bad. And I just wish everyone else had that kind of like frame of thinking, that like they wish that they were a better person and a better version of themselves than not. Because I don't think a lot of people think that way, which is kind of unfortunate, because I think the world would be different if we had that way of thinking.
Yeah. And also, like, you were talking about like good and bad. Like, I think like the only other like ones with like multiple gods. Well, I mean, I know like, because like we were talking about like like ancient Egypt, they didn't really have a heaven. And
sorry, say again.
like the Shinto, like ancient Egypt didn't really have a heaven. It was more like an underworld. And same with the Shinto religion, doesn't really have a heaven. But like ancient Greece had like the Elysian fields, like the Elysian gardens you go, or there was like the underworld with Hades was like the hell. And even Hinduism has like, when I was looking at it, they have, well, because you keep constantly being reborn, but there's like if you had bad karma, there's a hell-like place you go to before you get reincarnated while you're waiting, and then there's like and then let me just see which one it was. Then there was like then there's the Svarga is the like the heaven type place. Like if you had the good karma that you go before you get.
That's like the purgatory thing with Catholics. Or like in that movie with Robin Williams, What Dreams May Come, like he goes to heaven and his wife goes to purgatory because she kills herself, and he travels from heaven going to purgatory to try to save her, to bring her to heaven with him. It's a movie from the 90s, and it's trippy, but it's good.
Yeah. And I don't like that's a belief I don't like that, like you're kind of someone's being punished for committing suicide. Like, I don't like that. So.
No, and it's just very much like, but first of all, like I always go back to this. First of all, none of us asked to be here. So if someone makes the choice to take their life, that's their choice to do it. On another hand, like I wish that it wasn't that drastic. Like for example,
like wouldn't the divine be more like trying to guide that person to like to get like try to stop that person from like, or try to help that person find happiness, or help that just like, I'm going to punish you because you killed yourself. Like that's just a very
And I wish that it wasn't in such a way that like people are, number one, sort of like punished for doing something like that when they have no other options. But also on another hand, like I wish that our society wasn't so jacked up that people felt that was their only option. Like in Canada, they have a program called MAID, MAID. And if you are disabled and you can't get enough help, they will assist your suicide so that you could just take yourself out. Now, on one hand, if someone wants to make that choice to do that, I'm all for it. Free choice. Do whatever is necessary.
It's also some people have it like, it might not even be something. It's just also like the brain, like the chemical about, like some people have that as like they have suicidal thoughts. And
but if people got like whatever medication they may need or whatever help with like housing or food or whatever, then they might not necessarily feel that they have to do that. But because of the way society is, it's like, well, we won't help you to live, but we will help you to die. And it's just kind of like, but why? Why can't we help people to live? And granted, if someone wants to take their life, go. If that's your choice, that's your choice. Life is not easy. Nobody makes it easy for anybody. I get that. At the same time, if those resources were there, they might not necessarily want to take that choice, And so it has to do with like, are there resources here to help people? Yes. Okay, great. We can help people to live. But if the resources aren't there, I don't blame anybody for taking their life. Yeah. I get it, So, it just honestly depends on like what the heck is going on with our own society. And the fact that like Canada has that program, I feel like the United States will get there shortly too, because there are so many folks with disabilities here who are not getting help or support and slowly dying in their bodies because the support's not there. And
when Kevorkian was someone here that was looking at helping people die that were terminally ill, I think it was.
Yeah. And the thing is that maybe some of those people didn't have to die. They used to think I was terminally ill, in my early 30s. And it's like, no, I actually got it under control now, where I have the care for my lupus and I'm able to live very well because I have the medical support with the medication, with doctors that give a crap, with, actual care that's making sure that I'm all right. And I didn't used to have that. And a lot of other people still don't have that. And, if we had a society where, like Jesus said, taking care of people who might need assistance, then it might be a better place. But unfortunately, we don't have that. We're in a very much capitalist society where, it's basically, survival of the fittest, but like the extreme version. And it's just like, what the hell is that? How are we a society where we're actually taking care of people and actually giving a crap about our neighbors and also being like capitalism is law, and if you can't keep up, sucks to be you. Like, who the hell came up with that? Why is that the end all be all? And I just don't get it.
So, any final thoughts or anywhere you think you'd be a good point to end on?
I guess, I have multiple thoughts. Like, on one hand, like, there are probably multiple ways of experiencing the afterlife. Multiple different experiences people are going to have, regardless of where they go, regardless of what they believe now. And I honestly think that, like, as long as people aren't dicks to people, to other people, you'll end up in the good place, whatever that good place is, if there's even a good place at all. I know for me personally that there is a good place that I will be going, because I felt that when I was in between the realms at 25. But I don't think that you necessarily have to believe in that to go there. I think that it's just something that may happen when we pass on. So, like, be a good person. Like, don't be a dick. Don't be selfish. Don't be greedy. And that's not me saying, like, oh, give all your things away. But, like, if you see someone, and I don't mean like some random person who's homeless, I mean someone who you might know, or a neighbor or whatever, like, just care about them. Make sure that they're okay. And you don't have to take the clothes off your back to help somebody out. You don't have to, like, make yourself bankrupt to make sure that your neighbor is okay and solid. Like, and I think that if we each cared about the people around us a little bit more, it would help our society as a whole. And, we could wait for the government to come in and help us. I don't know if they will. Whatever. It is what it is. If they help, wonderful. But if they don't, that's okay too. We should be picking up some of the slack and helping our fellow human beings, because I think that is ultimately what the universe wants from us as human beings. And that's just the general feeling I have. And I think that helps us in the long run for our afterlife, because I do believe karma is real. And I do think that we have sort of like a karma that we build up in ourselves, not in our meat suit selves, but in our souls and spiritual selves. And it counts in the long run, and it counts along the way. So don't be a dick and be a good person. And don't just do it for the attention. Do it because you genuinely want to. And it should help you to get to a good place in the afterlife. And again, I don't believe in hell, but if there is one and you're a dick in this life, I don't know what's going to happen to you, buddy. So, yeah, I think that's an okay place to end.
Yeah. Well, I kind of said this before, that, like, my views kind of like, I don't really believe your consciousness goes on necessarily. I mean, I am open to ghosts and stuff, because that's like unfinished business, but I think it's more like, maybe there's sometimes like your entity lives on a bit, but I think it's more just like you kind of just go back to being one with everything else, because like we kind of all come from the same thing. Like Rumi has that line about like you came out of the dust, and like out of this you develop a self, and like I feel like we kind of just go back to like one with everything, and then maybe like a part of you kind of goes on, but then it becomes something else. Not exactly reincarnation, but like you live on, like a part of you still goes on, because like you go back into being one with everything.
And part of it, I feel like, is might be a choice of ours, and sometimes I think it's not a choice. Like, on one hand, like, I don't think I've learned in my past lives what I was supposed to learn, and that's why I came back now. But I think sometimes people come back because they want to come back and learn something else, and then other people don't come back at all. And then sometimes people don't go on other places, and some people go on to like some wild adventures in the other life. So I think that there's like multiple ways of being in the afterlife, just like there's multiple ways of being here. And it just honestly depends on what is going on with each individual person, because I feel like what's beyond this realm is, again, so much more than we can understand or experience, since there's so many levels and fourth and fifth dimensions. And
Yeah, that's why I like. I don't know if you played any of the Elder Scrolls games, but that's what I like about like their lore is like there's all these different religions, and it's like the ones who follow like the Nordic gods, like they go to Sovereign God, and then like there's also like the red, like the different. Everybody's belief is true for them. Like there's the different religions they have within that world, and like they all. I thought that was kind of neat, but I think it's that kind of that way here, and also, but like my spirituality and like is more focused on like this world, like here and now, and like you finding a spiritual path in this life and like making a heaven in this earth. So like, I guess like for me, like I'm less concerned with like the afterlife and more concerned with like the spiritual path, like in this life. So.
And I think that's the way to be. Like, I don't know why so many folks are so obsessed with like the afterlife. Like, be here, be present in these moments now, here, because you're living right now. And there's so many people who are so obsessed with what's going to happen after they're dead that they don't really live here. And then they're just assholes while they're here. And they're like, well, it's okay. I'm good with Jesus, so I'll be there. And eventually, like, no, be here now. Why are you living that way? And there's so many people like that. And I just don't understand like how they're able to function and live like that. But there are a lot of people like that who do that, especially evangelicals who are just like, oh, afterlife. And I'm like, but what about this life right here, right now? You're going to be here till you're like 100. Are you just going to be that way your whole life and then get to the afterlife? And God's like, well, you could have done it this way. Why? Yeah, it's very weird, but
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good, note to end on. Just, be here now and don't be an asshole.
Yeah, there you go. Be here now and don't be an asshole. There you go. That's it.
Well, thanks for coming on the show and everything. It was good talking to you again, all that. And maybe we'll do this again on another topic. So.
I will always come on your podcast, Sean. I always have very fun chats with you, and you let me go on tangents.
Yeah.
coffee riddle tangents.
Yep.
And so I'm always down.